flow studies were originally devised by Vincent Chikowitz. You were his student for a while. Why don't you tell us a little about the origins of flow studies? What does it mean?
Flow studies were a central topic for Vincent Chikowitz's teaching. Flow studies are exercises which we train our ability to create and maintain a regular and constant stream of air in all areas of playing an instrument. It doesn't matter if we're playing the musical scale, intervals, long tones, at any pitch, even during articulation. So when blowing, this principle of flow study applies. It means that air is constantly moving, always straight ahead and always in one direction. That's basically what's the goal of flow study. Vincent Chikowitz's initial idea was that long tones is, of course, a great tool, a great exercise to create a free tone in order to establish steady and healthy playing. The danger when we practice long tones, however, is that it can make us play statically, especially when we don't have a lot of experience. We can tense up and start playing stiffly. He referred to Herbert L. Clark and his technical studies that are technically already a form of flow study. Clark himself actually referred to these technical studies as tone studies. It's not just about practicing technical stuff, but also about achieving an expansion of tone through these exercises. That was the starting point from which Vincent Chikowitz expanded Clark's principle, and he's also altered the concept of long tones by preventing this danger of playing statically because, while the music remains in motion, this principle of keeping the air flowing regularly and continuously is transferred onto these exercises.
I've got a question there because I think this may create some misunderstandings. When talking about a constant stream of air, you mean that this stream of air is constantly active, progresses, but not necessarily that you should always release air in the same way.
No, the stream of air is, of course, always moving dynamically, sometimes also at different speeds that we need for different pitches or dynamics, different volumes, etc. There's always movement that requires constant activity, that's correct. It's just that this activity and the movement must be regular, must not be interrupted, which is what happens often when we're playing intervals. We feel the urge to secure the interval, stop the air, and try to force the interval with an air signal. It's exactly this process that flow study tries to observe and to provide training so we can handle these situations better.
Could you give some examples of flow studies according to Chikowitz?
Vincent Chikowitz created a series of exercises all following the same principle. They're legato exercises with regular, rhythmic movement, usually in groups of eighths or sixteenths. These exercises are basically all etudes collected from various booklets that all aim to train exactly that principle. The exercises are ordered from easiest etudes to fairly complex, demanding ones that challenge us quite a lot. They help us learn to train these aspects daily to truly internalize them. The main aim is to create the connection between intervals, especially when playing sequences of intervals. This is common also for string players and, of course, singers. An interval is never played with any interruption, but the stroke of the bow continues while the fingers play the interval, which creates this velvety effect, or whichever musical idea is behind this, that makes an interval sound round, soft, and fluent. That's exactly what flow study trains, and it's how we're able to expand our tonal abilities because we learn how to play more freely. It also trains our stamina because we learn to play lighter and more effectively. In summary, flow study trains all aspects of our play that we can benefit from. Sure, here's one of the first flow studies in this collection by Vincent Chikowitz, a very simple exercise. It's concerned only with diatonic movements along the musical scale. A slur always signifies that the one thing the air has to do is play a single, long tone. In terms of the air, we play one single long F in the first period. Your fingers play the melody. That's why it's so important to sing along in your head, so this melody can be created while the air is still able to flow regularly and without any resistance. like with a sustained tone. That way we can play all these sequences of tones and melodies like this. Of course, there are also some more difficult, complex exercises. Take this one, for example, where we've got to work with slightly bigger sequence of intervals and consequently with a larger scope of tones. The idea stays the same though. A slur is a sustained tone and we try to connect the intervals in a way that does not interrupt the flow of air. We need to think glissando, but not create a glissando, and connect the interval tones with the air while continuing to play. Again, with a sustained tone, and we should then continue with this whole group of notes all in one.
This flow study can then also be applied for articulation. So you distance yourself a little from the legato and interrupt the flow of air again.
That's exactly what should not happen. The idea of the flow study should actually be continued while we articulate. We need to try to leave the articulation of language to the tongue. Articulation is then literally language, i.e., we say the syllables with our tongue, and that's how we achieve this articulated effect. There's some very simple imagery to describe this that many will know. Imagine a garden hose that's connected to a tap. When we turn on the tap, we observe the long, uninterrupted stream of water. Now, if we want to interrupt this water flow, like with a sprinkler, everyone is going to say, well, I'm going to do this or that to the end of the garden hose. That's a completely natural reaction. Nobody is going to suggest turning the tap on and off to achieve this effect. The same can be applied to our flow of air. The turned-on tap is our flow study. The air remains in motion constantly. What we do to the garden hose with our finger, our tongue does with the air by partitioning the flow into rhythmic parts by speaking. Once we've understood this idea and know how to apply it, our articulation will be melodious and especially very light, and it will function within a phrasing musically, rather than just in choppy parts. You can vary this articulation our language offers us indefinitely. Everything is possible, from a soft da to an explosive if we need to play explosive sounds. We can speak tones or sounds in a connected, stretched out way, or we can speak taking breaks. The difference is that as soon as the air begins to flow, the tone remains open. As soon as we stop, we can also hear that chopped tones. Sometimes we might be required to use this technique, of course, but it should not be a core principle. Once we know our core principles, we can, of course, alter them depending on the style of the piece we're playing. To start with, however, we need this basic understanding, which is why it's so important for articulation to talk about language, so that we don't just play articulation, but also really speak what we want to play, both in the way that we learn to speak very clearly, to speak at the front of our mouths, to make our tongue movement fast and very straightforward and not too powerful.
Tap, tap, tap.
When it comes to fast articulation, double tonguing or triple tonguing, we also need to be able to speak these patterns when we want to play them. I often experience students playing very fast double tonguing passages and getting a bit tangled up, so they're unable to speak, but they continue to practice and this doesn't lead to success. We need to be able to speak or sing what we're playing, so that you can imagine what it sounds like, and that's how my language apparatus works. If we work on articulation with flow study principle, then it makes sense to start with the legato first. We have a scale. We play it in legato and then add more and more articulation, i.e. we start with 4 bonds, then play da-da-da, 2 bind, 6 blow, and try to maintain the task that legato gives the flow of air as more and more tongue is added. And so no one can gradually approach the articulation. Still, do not lose this principle of flow study. This is how we arrive at a healthy way of articulating and translating blow into sound.